This poem is called Woodwork for Seamus Heaney. What I've come to know of journeys is that most starts with a turn in the morning, some phrase, glimmer, some sound noses into sleep as a mole might snuffle through soil, nudging echoes of words, faint seeds to deeds. Good morning sprouts into air and life begins, following the ghostly scaffolds in its DNA. The grow code sketched in its cells, the seed stretches to root and stem, base and branch. It bears witness to our comings and goings, the kid clenched in the palm of its pram, braying for freedom. Teenagers engrossed in utmost gossip, couples kissing as if digging for hidden vowels, adults falling out, their tongues aflame. All its years, it takes in our precious vibrations, our treacherous human and hallowed ways, our boiling skies, our dying forests, our chainsaw teeth, our ravenous factories, where we thin it to slim limbs of wood, which you hold to continue its task of sketching into existence, of sketching out again.
I'm here joined by the fantastic poet, playwright, Inua Ellams. Hi, Inua.
Hi, Daljit. Hello.
Just want to firstly, I thought we'd maybe talk just briefly about your poem and then about your relationship to Seamus Heaney.
Yeah.
If that's okay. So your poem, fascinating poem. I really liked it. I like that kind of dense, clustered style you're going for. And you've been doing that for a while now, haven't you? Just for a couple of years at least.
Yeah, I think is an extreme it's an extreme end of the prompt to be economical with language, but I was trying to do so with punctuation as well, so that I would only use the forward slash to indicate everything from breath to a comma to a parenthesis to a hyphen. And that is the only punctuation used in this poem. So I wrote my last book really took this to the nth degree. It was called The Actual, and all the poems are written, and the only punctuation that appears is that. Yeah, but I was experimenting with that in this poem, Woodwork.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because at one hand, it feels almost claustrophobic when you look at it, but actually, once you get into poem, you do navigate really swiftly through because you've controlled the grammar and the language so well that you kind of journey us through swiftly. I like the kind of paradox at the heart of the poem, or for me anyway, that paradox that we're destroying nature, we're cutting down trees, and yet the pen comes from the tree. That's a very interesting idea.
And I was thinking specifically about the pencil because Peter Edwards drew the portrait which inspired this in pencil. So I imagine him drawing and Seamus writing, and both with the pencil. So they're using this thing which is symbolic of deforestation, right? You cut down the tree to use the wood to create a pencil. At the same time, they were using this to invent the world, to safeguard it, to mark out humanity, and to preserve our memories. So I was just thinking about that paradox when I was working on the poem.
And that paradox works quite nicely with Seamus Heaney's great poem from his first collection, Death of the Naturalist, the digging poem. And he says, and I'll dig with the pen, and his relationship to the environment, to nature, to landscape, to his heritage. So this poem really kind of speaks back to digging in a way to me when I first read it.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely intentional. But I also have a poem called Guerrilla Garden Writing Poem, which came out in my second pamphlet. And it's about what it means to be an urbanite, what it means to live here. But I draw parallels between urban dwellers finding paths through the city and a poet finding paths through the city of language and the rules and regulations of punctuation, etc. And at the same time, trying to plant seeds of ourselves in language and in the city itself. And in it, I end talking about having a pen, and this is what I'll dig, this is what I'll sew with. So returning to that epic, gorgeous, indelible refrain idea that Seamus nudged in Death of a Naturalist, that is just so emblematic of so much of what it means to write.
That's interesting. You talk about journeys, and I know you used to do your night journeys.
Yeah.
You walk around London at night with writers or people from London community, I think.
Yeah, the project is called The Midnight Run. It's about finding urban journeys, loose routes through the city. And this poem also begins with journeys, what I have come to know of journey. So the ideas are cyclical and they keep orbiting my work and popping up in various ways, shape, and form. I'm in early conversations yet about doing the Midnight Run in Ireland for the first time next year. So hopefully I should gather a group of Irish writers to walk through the city and dig with me.
That would be wonderful. And I guess thinking of digging the poem itself, Seamus Heaney's, he talks about, I think he was driving and he put the handbrake up or down. I can't remember which way it went round. And that kind of almost got the poem started for him. So the act
Yeah,
of writing and journeying seems to become synonymous, don't they? Because we do journey in our imagination. When
yeah.
did you come across Seamus Heaney, by the way? Let's talk
Um,
about him a little bit. Your
I
relationships.
lived
I think I
in.
came across him because he won the Nobel. So I couldn't miss him, and then I became a teacher.
All
And I was
right,
teaching him almost every day. I was teaching a James
everywhere.
Dean poem. But what was your experience?
I lived in Ireland for 3 years between the years of 1999 and 2001, 2002. And my basketball coach, I used to play basketball then. I still do a little bit here for fun. But my basketball coach was also my English teacher. And he loved poetry. He was an avid fan of poetry, and he taught us Shakespeare and Keats and Elizabeth Bishop and Boland with such passion and such verve that it stayed with me till this day. Is why I am a poet, because I had a great English teacher, but he also introduced us to Seamus Heaney, and finding his understanding of his Ireland through Heaney was incredibly visceral to witness. And Heaney's connection to the land helped my coach understand that about himself and how to teach what it means to be displaced, to find home again, which as an immigrant at the time was everything that I was thinking about, you know. So I had a great English teacher who introduced me to Seamus Heaney, and through that I understood a lot of the politics of Ireland. And that's when I learned so much about my Nigerian heritage. And I say that because in my penultimate book of poems called After Hours, I have a poem called A Shooting Script, which is based on a poem with the same title by Seamus Heaney. And in that, Seamus discusses sectarian violence. And I left Nigeria because of sectarian violence, because of Muslim and Christian clashes in northern Nigeria, where I was born. So when I left Nigeria and settled in the UK, I was still negotiating that within the politics of the relationship between England and Ireland. And when I moved to Ireland, suddenly there were Seamus poems teaching me how the Irish had navigated sectarian issues and also how I could navigate that in my life.
Yeah, I think there is a similarity, isn't it, in the sense that he writes those poems about public issues, as you say, about
Mm,
sectarian violence, which are not the most glamorous things to write about in quiet poetry, but he seems to kind of bring them alive, doesn't he? These public experiences and make them personal and interior. And you seem to do that as well. And that's quite a hard skill to achieve, I think, because the inclination would be to write an angry performance piece, a kind of public poem about the ills of the world, wouldn't it?
yeah. And I
Um,
think that was probably my first lessons came from reading James's work about how to really distill it into the most tactile of objects, of things, of feelings, and you imbibe the politics that way. You know, you're right. That's the easy thing to do, just to go out and attack. But Seamus brought it close to you. He brought it home, and I learned from that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about his work, the great line, "Whatever you say nothing," and he kept
Mm.
out of, throwing himself into, Catholicism and Protestant, the whole sectarian stuff by making a strong opinion. How do you feel about our present times? I mean, as a poet, do you feel like making a statement in your poetry? Because things are so vexed, aren't they? We think about culture wars or race issues, things like that. Is there a
Mhm.
certain point where you feel you have to make a statement? And have to
Um,
kind of speak up because I feel like we do, don't we? So maybe we come from a race issue in Britain. People don't get it, do they? Maybe, and then so we
I
have to
think
go
a
a
lot of
step
people
further.
don't, and I think a lot of people don't know how to get it. I think I think if you feel like you have to make if you feel societal pressure to make a statement, then you're probably going about it the wrong way, right? It has to come from you first. If you're concerned, if you're moved, if there's a way of understanding or misunderstanding the world, which you think is interesting to articulate, which might contribute to the issue, And I think you should step forward cautiously and to do so, rather than just feeling like you have to say something because everyone else is saying something. Because if you do that, then no one is really listening to each other, you know. And I cautiously approach things. And again, from reading Seamus and understanding some of his work, I understood the specific intersecting lenses of my background, the things that make me understand and have skin in the game of these issues, from migration to racism to the quest for home and all of those things. I understand them from my particular background, being a sort of Irish, Nigerian, English, British immigrant, hybrid, Christian, Muslim, hip hop hood. You know, all of that creates this fertile ground that I constantly shake, and I find new ways that they intersect, and that is where I write from, rather than just saying things. You know.
I love the hybrid identity there. Fantastic. And also, I guess
Sure.
like Seamus Heaney, Seamus Heaney did, well, I guess more translations and versions of plays, and as well as the poetry.
Yeah.
You are a playwright. I mean, I saw your basketball play in I forgot the name now. Sorry,
The
terrible
half god
memory.
of rainfall.
Yeah, in Kilburn, at a tricycle a couple of years ago. That's all, bit before the pandemic. So I
Yeah.
mean, that's fantastic and very funny and very political in a subtle way. And the audience
Yeah.
love it, didn't they? You obviously weren't there that night, whichever night it was, at the tricycle, but it kind of really connected with the audience.
Yeah.
Is it a case finding the right subject matter for the right form, or are you in a poetry head or a play head and you do one or the other, or how does that work for
I
you?
think it's a case of, yeah, of finding the right topic and the right classic poem, especially or play, especially when I'm doing adaptations. It gives me space to really honor the originals, but but space for interpretations and retelling. I can't. I have a couple of other big adaptations coming out, one by Sophocles and another potentially by a Nigerian author. And the same questions I ask myself, which my last adaptation was Chekhov's Three Sisters, which I set during the Nigerian Civil War. And the question I asked myself is, what was the context in which this play was written? What was it speaking to? What were the public thinking about this issue at the time? How did the characters in this play meet that public? And then I asked myself those questions about Nigerian audiences, then Black British audiences, then British audiences, then global audiences, about Chekhov's play, which I set during the Nigerian Civil War, the Biafran War. And there are these expanding constellations, these rings of questions, which I try to answer before I begin writing. So I know how to speak to all of those audiences and how I do all of that whilst making my version, my interpretation, as clean and as honest and as clear as possible. There's a lot of pre-work required before you begin the work of writing.
It must be enormous work because, as I say, as a writer of colour, in a sense, in Britain, we're writing for a white middle class audience largely. They're the ones who come buy the books or come to our shows quite often. If you
Yeah.
want to be out London, around the country, so in a sense, you have to you're writing for the kind of the ideal audience, which might be yourself or your own heritage. But then you have to write for the kind of white Western middle class audience. That the writing for two people at the same time, which other writers don't have an issue if they're born in that country of that colour and stuff. It's harder, isn't it? It must be hard. You must have to keep rewriting and negotiating.
You do have to keep rewriting and renegotiating. There's something that Stephen King said about writing. You should write with the door closed, but rewrite with the door open. And that is at the forefront of my practice. When I'm writing, it's just myself. When I consider the door opening, like you said, I imagine an upper white middle class audience might stream in. How do I include them in the dynamics? I think so about those beyond London, beyond so yeah, it's really difficult. You require various levels of knowing, of awarenesses to be able to do so well, which makes Seamus' work all the more incredible because of his reach of audiences. How he'd write these skeletal poems that were so specific and cleanly about Irish living, but it could be mapped onto any part of the world.
Absolutely. And I love your quote about the door closing in your.
Mm.
Sadly, we have to now close the door to run out of time. We really look forward to seeing your two plays. Do you know when the first one's on, or is it this year?
Yes, it's in September next year. It hasn't been announced yet, so I have to keep my mouth shut.
Oh, okay,
And
sorry.
the other, I'm not sure when. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for making the time to speak to us today, Inya. It's a real pleasure
Thanks, Daljit.
and an honour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, speak soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.